I never expected to spend the summer working for my dad's best friend. Honestly, I didn't even know the guy still lived in town until Dad mentioned he needed help renovating his old bookstore downtown. I was home from college, broke, and desperate enough to take anything that paid. "You'll like Theo," Dad said over breakfast one morning. Bit of a loner these days, but a good guy. Smart, quiet. You'll mostly be moving shelves and hauling boxes. I nodded, not really paying attention. I figured Theo was some older guy with back issues in a dusty collection of Hemingway novels. What I didn't expect was to walk into that bookstore and find him. Tall, late 30s, lean, with a 5 o'clock shadow and arms that looked like they belonged to someone who actually used his gym membership. He had ink along his forearms, subtle lines peeking from under a rolled-up sleeve, and a voice that landed somewhere between warm and disarming. "You must be Liam," he said, wiping his hands on a rag as I stepped in. "You look like your dad. Just taller." I laughed. "He told me you needed someone who could lift stuff." "I'm decent at lifting." He smirked, eyes flicking over me in a way that made my stomach do something weird. "We'll see." The first week was uneventful. I came in around 10, helped Theo rearrange bookshelves, carried boxes of inventory from the basement, and tried not to get caught staring when he'd stretch or roll his shoulders after moving something heavy. He wasn't chatty, but he wasn't rude either. Just quiet, introspective. Then, one afternoon, everything shifted. It was humid as hell. The kind of thick, sticky summer day that makes every movement feel like a chore. We'd spent hours in the back room, sorting books that had been gathering dust for years. I was sweating through my shirt, my arms aching, and Theo had gone to the front to grab us drinks from the cooler. When he came back, he tossed me a bottle of water and sat on the edge of a low shelf, looking more tired than usual. "You always this quiet?" I asked, more out of boredom than anything else. He glanced at me. "I talk when there's something worth saying." I grinned. "Deep. I'm a bookstore owner," he said with a small smirk. "It's kind of the job." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "You ever feel like you're just waiting for something to happen?" I blinked. All the time, yeah. Like some big moment is supposed to come along and make everything make sense?" "Exactly." I looked at him more closely then. There was something in his face I hadn't noticed before. Something tired, and maybe a little lonely. He caught me watching and tilted his head, curious. "What?" "Nothing," I said quickly, but the moment stretched. Neither of us looked away. Later that afternoon, when we were locking up, he reached for his keys at the same time I went to grab my backpack. Our hands brushed. Just a small touch. But it was enough to freeze both of us in place. I looked up. So did he. And for a moment, the air between us shifted. He didn't pull his hand back right away. Neither did I. It was like we were both waiting to see what the other would do next. Eventually, he cleared his throat, stepped back, and said, "See you tomorrow, Liam." But I didn't miss the way his voice sounded, just a little hoarse. And I definitely didn't miss the way he looked at me as I walked out the door. I told myself it was nothing. I'd be proven wrong very soon. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I told myself it was just the heat. Our old AC unit barely worked. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment at the shop. About the way Theo's hand had lingered against mine. The way neither of us said anything, but everything had been said in that silence. I wasn't even sure what I was feeling. Intrigued? Nervous? Turned on? Maybe all of the above. When I got to the store, the door was already propped open, and Theo was at the counter, organizing a stack of receipts. He looked up when I walked in, gave me a brief nod, like always, then went right back to what he was doing. For a second, I wondered if I'd made the whole thing up. Maybe it had been just a weird moment. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But then I caught him watching me in the reflection of the glass door. Not just glancing, watching. Like he was trying to work something out in his head. We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about anything, really. The day passed in a blur of moving furniture, relabeling sections, and pretending the tension between us didn't feel like a third person in the room. At one point, I climbed a short ladder to adjust a light fixture, and Theo held it steady from below. When I glanced down, his hands were wrapped tight around the metal, knuckles flexed. His eyes flicked up, met mine, and neither of us looked away. "You good up there?" he asked, voice lower than usual. "Yeah," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "Just checking the angle." He smirked, and I had to look away before I lost my footing. Around 5, the skies darkened out of nowhere. Thunder cracked in the distance, and rain followed, hammering against the windows in heavy, uneven bursts. Theo peeked outside, then glanced back at me. "Well, guess we're stuck here for a bit. Roads'll be hell." He didn't sound upset about it. Neither was I. We sat in the back, both of us a little damp from locking up during the downpour. The air was thick with humidity and something else I couldn't name. We drank from the old soda machine. Ginger ale for him, root beer for me, and let the storm rumble around us. "You always this quiet?" I asked again, breaking the silence. Theo looked at me, amused. "Didn't we already do this?" "I mean, like, with people. You always keep your distance?" Something passed through his eyes. Not anger. Not even discomfort. Just something like resignation. "Most people don't notice," he said finally, "so I don't bother explaining." I took a sip, heart thumping. "What if someone did notice?" He tilted his head. "Did you?" I shrugged, playing it cool even though my pulse was racing. Hard not to. Another silence. Then he asked, almost too casually, "And what do you think you noticed?" There it was, the moment I'd been dancing around for 2 days. The invitation or the test? I looked right at him. That maybe I'm not the only one wondering what that touch meant yesterday. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. Instead, he set his soda down slowly, leaned back in his chair, and said, "You're not." The room felt hotter, though the AC was on. Outside, the rain kept falling, the sky dimming to a dusky gray. And inside that tiny bookstore, something unspoken finally cracked open between us. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew I wasn't leaving. Not yet. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Rain battered the windows in sheets, and thunder rattled the old wooden shelves. The lights flickered once, briefly, then steadied. Theo hadn't moved from his chair. Neither had I. His gaze was steady, calm. Mine was anything but. "So," I said, my voice low, "we're really not going to pretend that didn't happen." He let out a quiet breath. Not quite a sigh, more like a slow release of tension. I'm not good at pretending. That's the problem. I shifted forward, elbows on my knees. "So don't." He watched me for a beat. Then, carefully, he stood up and walked to the nearest bookshelf, fingers brushing over the spines like he needed something to do with his hands. I could tell he was thinking, weighing something. Probably everything. "You're what, 21? He asked, not looking at me. 22, I said. He nodded once. "Right." I waited. "You ever wonder why I've been single for so long?" he asked finally. I blinked. "Not really my business." "No," he said, still facing the shelf. "But you notice things, so maybe you guessed." I swallowed. I might have. Another pause. Then he turned around. His expression wasn't guarded this time. It was open, tired, honest. "I've spent most of my life being careful," he said. "Too careful. I was always the friend. The guy people liked but never thought about that way. It was easier to stay quiet, safer." "And now?" I asked, heart pounding. "Now I've got a guy sitting in front of me who's smart, funny, and doesn't flinch when I look at him a little too long." His voice softened. "And I'm wondering what the hell I'm doing." I stood, slowly. Every inch of space between us suddenly felt like something I wanted to cross. "You're not doing anything wrong," I said, stepping closer. "I'm your dad's best friend. I'm not a kid. You're still young." I looked up at him, close enough now that I could feel the warmth of his breath. Maybe, but I'm also here, right now, and so are you. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes dropped to my mouth just for a second. Barely noticeable. But I caught it, and that was all I needed. I leaned in, slowly, giving him every chance to pull away, but he didn't. His hand came up, almost reflexively, resting against my jaw as I closed the distance. The kiss was tentative at first, careful, testing the waters, but when he didn't stop me, when he leaned into it with a quiet sound in the back of his throat, everything shifted. It deepened. The storm outside might as well have vanished. All I could feel was him, his mouth, his breath, the way he pressed against me like he'd been holding back for years. Eventually, we broke apart, just enough to breathe. "This changes things," he said, voice rough. "Yeah," I murmured, "but maybe that's not a bad thing." He pulled back, just enough to look at me, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You have no idea what you've just started." Guess we'll find out. Outside, the rain still fell, but inside, the air felt different. Like we'd finally stopped pretending. We didn't say much after that. There wasn't anything to say, really. Not yet. Just a long silence filled with glances and the slow realization that everything had changed. Theo gave me a once-over, like he was still trying to make sense of me, like he couldn't quite believe I'd kissed him, or maybe couldn't believe he'd let me. Eventually, he cleared his throat and said, "Come on, the upstairs office has a couch. Better than sitting on this dusty floor all night if the storm keeps up." I nodded, following him up the narrow staircase behind the break room. I'd only been up there once before to drop off a box of receipts. I remembered thinking the office looked like the kind of space someone only half lived in, sparse. Books stacked in uneven towers. A desk that was more storage than workspace. A single couch pushed against the far wall. Theo flipped on a lamp. Warm yellow light spilled across the room. I hovered near the doorway, unsure of what came next. "You don't have to stay," he said, glancing at me over his shoulder. "I know." He hesitated. "But if you do," I stepped in before he could finish. "I want to." He didn't answer right away, just nodded once and sat on the couch, stretching his legs out, patting the space beside him. I sat down, close but not quite touching. My knee brushed his and I didn't move it. Neither did he. We sat like that for a while, the rain drumming against the windows, the storm now less violent, but still steady. Outside was wet and gray and distant. Inside was something else entirely. Warmer. Tighter. Theo leaned his head back, closing his eyes. "You're messing me up, you know that?" "Why?" "Because this isn't supposed to happen." I leaned back too. "Says who?" He let out a breath. "Everyone." I turned to look at him. "You worried about my dad?" "Among other things." "Then don't be," I said, maybe too quickly. "This is between us." He looked at me then. Really looked. "You sure about that?" I nodded. "More than I've been sure about anything in a long time." His gaze flicked down, then back up, and I could see the internal struggle play out behind his eyes. Restraint, conflict, want. Then he moved. The kiss this time wasn't tentative. It was deeper, hungrier. A silent surrender to something we'd both been fighting, probably from the moment we met. "Tell me if I need to stop," he whispered. I barely got the word out. "Don't," and I let him. God, I wanted him to. The storm outside had faded into background noise. In that cramped office, there was no bookstore, no age gap, no family ties, just us, and the slow, quiet unraveling of everything we thought we were supposed to resist. Eventually, we pulled apart, breathless and flushed, my shirt halfway undone, his hands still resting low on my waist. He rested his forehead against mine, eyes closed. "I'm going to be in so much trouble," I grinned. "Probably. And you think this is funny?" "A little." "Trouble," he repeated. "You're nothing but trouble." I kissed him one more time. Then stop pretending you don't want it. The rain eventually stopped, but we didn't move. We stayed curled up on that old couch, half tangled in each other, the dim office light still glowing beside us. For a while, neither of us said anything. It wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Charged, sure, but peaceful in that rare way that happens only when two people have crossed a line they can't uncross and both feel weirdly relieved. Then he stirred. "You know," he said, voice low and rough, "this is gonna make work tomorrow real interesting." I let out a dry laugh. "I think we already passed interesting about an hour ago." He tilted his head to look at me. His hair was a little messy, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "Are you gonna tell your dad?" "Are you?" he groaned, running a hand through his hair. "I have no idea. I can barely figure out what this even is." I sat up slightly, enough to face him. "Okay, then, let's not figure it out tonight. Let's just exist in this for a second. Can we do that?" His mouth curved, reluctantly. "You're a lot more mature than I gave you credit for. You're a lot less emotionally unavailable than I thought." I shot back and he gave me a small shove. We got dressed, eventually, not because we wanted to, but because the couch was narrow, the air was cooling, and reality was starting to knock on the edges of our bubble. We stood side by side at the top of the stairs, neither of us eager to head down. "I'll drop you off," he said. "It's not raining anymore. I can walk." Theo raised an eyebrow. "Let me. It'll be weird enough tomorrow without me wondering if you made it home alive." I didn't argue. The drive was short and quiet. This time, the silence between us felt different. No longer loaded, but full. Like there were things we both wanted to say, but didn't need to just yet. When he parked outside my place, I didn't reach for the handle immediately. "Hey," I said. He turned toward me. "Yeah?" "I meant it earlier. This doesn't have to be a big deal right now. But it also doesn't have to be nothing." His eyes lingered on mine. "I don't want it to be nothing." A beat. Then another. Then I leaned over, kissed him, short, soft, just enough to seal the moment, and stepped out into the night. I didn't look back until I reached the front door. He was still there, engine idling, headlights casting shadows across the sidewalk. He lifted a hand. I did too. And then he drove off. Inside, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell this had happened so fast. Wondering what tomorrow would feel like. Whether I'd walk into the shop and find Theo awkward and distant again, or if we'd pick up right where we left off. I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing. Whatever came next, I wasn't ready to let it go. The next morning, I almost didn't go in. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror with the toothbrush hanging from my mouth, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to say to a guy I'd kissed, touched, undressed, and then watched drive off into the night like none of it had happened. It wasn't that I regretted it. Far from it. But I didn't know if Theo would feel the same in daylight. By the time I finally walked into the bookstore, 10 minutes late, he was already there, restocking the fiction shelf like it was any other morning. "Hey," I said, voice a little too careful. He looked up, gave me a small nod. "Hey." That was it. No weird tension, no obvious avoidance, just casual, maybe too casual. I started to think I'd imagined the whole thing, but then, just as I turned to head to the back, he said, "Come upstairs when you're done unpacking the new delivery." I paused, nodded. Okay. We didn't speak for another hour. I hauled boxes. He stayed out front, but I felt his presence the whole time, like a current running through the floorboards. When I finally climbed the stairs to the office, he was already waiting, sitting on the edge of the desk like he had something planned. I leaned against the door frame, unsure how to start. "So," I said. He looked up. "So. That wasn't a one-time thing, right?" "No," he said without hesitation. "It wasn't?" I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "But that doesn't mean it's not complicated," he added. I know. I'm not good at this. Relationships, I mean. Or whatever this might be. You think I am? I laughed lightly. This is new for me too. Theo stood, walking over until he was right in front of me. You're younger. You've got time to figure this stuff out. And what? I asked. You don't? His jaw tensed. I've spent years not letting myself want anything that didn't make sense. And now, this. You. I reached for his hand. It doesn't have to make sense yet. It just has to be real. He looked down at our hands, then back up at me. You're serious about this? I nodded. Yeah. That did something to him. His shoulders dropped, like a tension he'd been holding for years finally eased. He stepped closer, pressing his forehead to mine, his hand sliding up my side like it was instinct now. I want this, he said, barely above a whisper, and I knew he meant it. We kissed again, slower this time. Less urgency, more meaning. His hands on my waist, mine in his hair, the world shrinking until it was just the two of us and the soft creak of old floorboards under our feet. We didn't take it further that day. Didn't need to. We just stood there in the quiet, holding each other, finally letting it be real. When we walked back downstairs, the bell above the front door jingled, and a voice called out, Theo? We both froze. My dad, standing in the middle of the store, holding 2 coffees, looking straight at us. Theo cleared his throat, stepping slightly forward. Hey man. I tried to play it cool. Dad. He looked between us, eyes narrowing just slightly. Everything okay? Yeah, we both said, too fast. A beat of silence. Then Dad held out the coffees. Brought you guys some fuel. Figured you'd need it. I took one. Theo did too. And we both tried not to make it obvious how awkward we suddenly felt. But the look Dad gave us before walking out? That said, he noticed more than he let on. The bell over the door jingled again as my dad left, and the silence that followed felt deafening. I stood there, gripping the coffee cup like it was a lifeline, eyes locked on the door long after it had closed. Theo let out a breath behind me. He knows. Yeah, I said. He definitely knows. We didn't speak for a few seconds. Then I turned to Theo, trying to read his face. He looked calm on the outside, but his jaw was tight, his brow furrowed. You okay? I asked. He nodded slowly. I don't know. I think I was bracing for that moment for so long. Now that it's happened, I'm not sure what to do. What can we do? He took a sip of his coffee, then gave me a tired smile. Pretend we're just co-workers again? I snorted. Pretty sure we're past that. Theo set his cup down. I'm not gonna lie to your dad. Good, I said. Me either. And I'm not gonna pretend that what's happening between us is just a phase, or a mistake, or whatever else makes it easier to explain. I stepped closer, heart pounding. So what are we saying? That I want to keep seeing you, he said, voice steady. That I don't want this to end just because someone else might not get it. I felt my chest tighten, in the best way. I don't either. We stood there, in that moment, in the middle of the quiet shop. Books all around us like silent witnesses to our conversation. It wasn't some grand declaration or dramatic confession. It was just honest, simple, real. That night, I went home expecting a full-on interrogation. Instead, Dad waited until after dinner, when we were both standing in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. You like working with Theo? He asked casually, not looking at me. Yeah, I said. He's different than I expected. Dad gave a small nod. He's been through a lot, always kept people at arm's length. I hesitated. What would you say if I told you there was something between us? Dad paused, then looked at me. Really looked. I'd say, he said slowly, that I know you're old enough to make your own choices. And if you think there's something real there, then I trust you to figure it out. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Thanks. He nodded once, then turned back to the dishes like we hadn't just had the most quietly life-changing conversation of my adult life. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. I kept working at the shop, And Theo and I got better at existing in that in-between space, half public, half private. We'd steal moments in the back room, quiet smiles and brushes of hands. Nothing obvious, nothing reckless, just us. Some nights, after closing, we'd go back upstairs, sit on that same couch in the dim light, knees touching, talking about everything and nothing. His walls slowly came down. I saw the way he softened when he laughed. The way he listened when I talked about school or writing or what I wanted to do next. And eventually, the lines between us blurred into something I didn't need to define anymore. It was just real. One night, as we locked up, he handed me my backpack and said, "You ever think about staying here longer? After the summer?" I looked at him. "You asking me to?" He smiled. "Maybe," I grinned. "Maybe I'd say yes." We walked out into the warm night air, side by side, the quiet between us easy now. Familiar. Theo reached for my hand. Just briefly. Just enough. And I let him.